Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we're going to talk about buyouts in Pokemon. Recently, somebody made a thread on E4. Is it possible to buy out all the PSA 10 First Edition base set Charizards? In short, if you have no attention span, the TLDR is no, it's not. It's not realistic. Moreover, I'm going to talk about buyouts and how they are not a feasible strategy in Pokemon. I would even argue that I don't really think they can truly exist in Pokemon. I think their existence in this hobby is somewhat of a paradox, which I'll get into later. But to start with, for people who aren't aware what a buyout is, it's simply a strategy to buy as much of an item as you want. Whether it's Charizard, Gretzky, Black Lotus, Pikachu, base set energy, pick your poison, it doesn't matter. You are simply trying to acquire as much of that item to build a position on that item. And now typically the positions for buyouts or the feelings towards buyouts are polarized. It's usually one side that absolutely hate it and they think that buyouts are literally Hitler and evil incarnate and that they're terrible for everybody. And then there's the other side where people just don't really care because at the end of the day, these are pieces of cardboard with ink on them and you don't need them to survive. So in relation to Charizard, it's actually a really good example of how buyouts won't work in Pokemon. So the PSA 10 First Edition base set Charizard is a marquee item in the hobby. Everybody knows that artwork. So many collectors want that card. There's never going to be enough supply to meet the demand. There are cross collectors coming and buying them. There are so many people buying that exact card. Now, specifically with the PSA 10 grade, it sells right now for $40,000. The current availability is somewhere between 1 to 2 copies, so that's typically the average total availability on the market. The entire amount graded is 120. So you have 120 PSA 10 copies over 20 years of that card. That's pretty much nothing. Again, there's never going to be enough supply of that card. 120 copies is nowhere near enough supply to meet the demand. So therefore, you have an item that's extremely difficult to acquire, which is a huge problem if you're trying to buy it out, because the biggest part of buying out is buying it. You need to be able to buy the card. You need to be able to acquire the card. And with this one, it's very difficult. It's expert mode. So the fallacy that I'm going to start with, if you like fallacies, we got a lot to go through. Not phallic objects, fallacies. Number one is going to be the price fallacy. A lot of people think, okay, hang on, if I offer $100,000 or more than double the going rate, surely I'll be able to buy most to all of the copies out there. No, this has already happened. The card went from $5,000 to $10,000, and most to all copies didn't appear. It went from $10,000 to $20,000. Most to all copies didn't appear. Then it went again from $20,000 to $40,000. You probably know what I'm going to say. Most to all copies didn't appear. In fact, once the price started to increase more and more, the less copies appear over time. Even with the pop report increasing, you have less copies over time. Ironically, when the pop was at its lowest and when the price was at its lowest, that's when the most copies were available. So if you go back to when the price was like $5,000 to $10,000, you had maybe anywhere from 5 to 7 total copies on the market to purchase. And you had the pop report sitting in the 60s, I think, the high 60s at the time, so about half of what it is today. However, you had the most copies available to purchase. So when the price increases, typically the availability decreases as well. And a lot of people probably want to know why. So the answer for this is that the person spending $40,000 or $50,000 is going to be a more specialized buyer. You know, when you're in the 5 to 10K bracket, that's going to have more variety. You might have someone in there in college who's spending all of their money on the card. You might have just an average gainfully employed adult spending their discretionary income. There's a wide variety there, and also you have more opportunity for flippage. Oh yeah, we got to talk about flippers in at least once a video. So in the 5 to 10K bracket, I would say 10K is pretty much the general cutoff in Pokemon for flipping activity, especially once you get up to 40K, higher up the mountain. Thinner air, the oxygen's too thin for the Poliwag to survive. So it's really hard to take something at 40K, throw that kind of capital around when you're a flipper, and immediately flip it. There's not much incentive there. Where in the 5 to 10K bracket, that's more feasible. So therefore, you have more activity between 5 and 10K. When you get to 40K, 50, and then 100, if that's what you're offering, You're hitting people who are probably spending money that they don't need on something they genuinely want. And I think that's the crux of why buyouts don't work in Pokemon for most items, because most items that are in demand have some rarity to them. Where something like Magic, it's a different setup. You have playability for items that are being produced still. A lot of that stuff is still in production, or at least there's a higher availability for it. But the reason why people are buying it is because they want to play it. They want to put it in a deck. They might need 4 of them or whatever to put into a deck. Well, with Pokemon, an item like your perfect example right here, Victory Ring Pikachu, Charizard, First Edition Shadowless, I don't care what it is. It's something that has some type of difficulty to acquisition, so therefore it's really hard to hoard a bunch of this. Now, I'm sure people will say, well, what about that Gary guy? What about smpratte and the trophies? There are these people out there who have positions, and that's our next fallacy. That's fallacy number 2. Building positions in Pokemon is not easy. It takes an exceptional variable. Whether that exceptional variable is a F ton of money, it's like the Rosebud hack where you just have a ton of capital. That might be one aspect. Another might be effort. You're constantly doing this over time. Effort plus time can negate some of that capital. But at the end of the day, the people who have built these positions, I could speak for myself, I could speak for Gary, I could speak for Rudy as well in Magic. It's the combination of all 3. It's doing all this stuff for like 15 years straight, spending money at a time when everybody would say it was speculative. You sit down with a financial advisor, they're going to rate your portfolio from conservative to speculative. My spending was over here. It was beyond speculative. So that's what it was. I was buying and spending above buying speculatively and spending above what anybody would at the time, more aggressively. I was engaged more than a lot of people were than the average person. So therefore you have consistent exceptions over 10 years. That's how you get these positions built. It's not replicable. That's the takeaway. That's why the position fallacy is a fallacy, is because it's not replicable. It doesn't step out of Pokemon, go into something like Magic with Rudy. I do Magic for fun on the sides. I do some of the binders. I've done the 4 Horsemen. I'm doing some Alpha. I actually have a Time Walk. Here we go. Got a Time Walk just sitting right here. Still haven't put him in a binder. But the bottom line is I'm just doing this on the side for fun. And even if I want to ramp it up and be aggressive, I can't possibly build the position Rudy has. It's just not possible at this point. It's not feasible. So, at the end of the day, building a position in Pokemon through a buyout strategy is not a thing. And most importantly, in my opinion, I think the idea of a buyout in Pokemon is a paradox. I think it's paradoxical. I don't think you can actually hit that sweet spot that's necessary to have a successful buyout. So what you need for a buyout in Pokemon is to have something that has enough supply out there that you can buy the supply, but simultaneously not too much where it saturates. It's like the opposite end of magnets. They're not working together. That sweet spot, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that would be at the end of the day. Because what you have now for modern product is it's so saturated that for the stuff that's available, if you want to buy it out, someone's going to be like, oh, that went up $10. I have a ton of these. I have 50 of these. I'm a business who has an employee that just opened up, 5 cases, and we can just put all that stuff out there. So I don't know what that little magic bullet answer is for a buyout to work. In my opinion, I think it's a paradox because the necessary variables pull from each other. Something that has enough supply but is also rare enough that it has legs. That's a very, very rare bullseye that you're trying to aim at. And some examples I can think of that might fit that, like Tropical Beach, for example. I remember in 2011 when I was at Worlds, I impulsively bought like 40 Tropical Beach staff cards because I was there on the ground floor when they premiered. And I was like, whoa, this is a new card. It says Tropical Beach, new artwork. I've never seen that before. And I just bought a ton of them because I liked them. I was just so excited. I'm like, oh, this is a new card. I'm losing my mind. And then the players come over who actually read the cards. I don't read the actual text. So like, this is actually really playable. So that might hit that sweet spot. And even then, it's not really feasible to go and just take them all off the market. And that has that playability element so you can echo Magic a little bit where you need it to play. But there's still enough supply to meet that demand. I think it hit like, what, $200, a couple $100? A few $100 at the end of the day was the max. And that was all organic, organic activity. So at the end of the day, I think a buyout is more of an emotional idea, emotional fallacy. It's a buzzword. I think that's really what it is. I think it's a buzzword in Pokemon. I'm not touching Magic because I know Magic's a different entity, but in Pokemon specifically, I think a buyout, when people say buyout, it is ultimately a buzzword. And, to finish with the idea of Charizard, using Charizard as the example. Something like PSA 10 Charizard is only about acquisition. When you're dealing with the rarest, most valuable, historic, pile it on. It doesn't matter if it's illustrators, trophies, Charizard, Lotus, Mantle Rookie, Stradivarius, Picasso painting. I don't care. Pick your poison. You don't have the luxury of strategy. You just don't. The only aim you have is trying to acquire that item. I mean, let's just make some crazy claims right now. Let's just say some crazy stuff and listen to how it sounds. I want to buy out the illustrators. I want to buy out the Pikachu trophies. I want to buy out all the PSA 10 Charizards. I want to buy out Honus Wagner. I want to buy out Mickey Mantle. I want to buy out Picasso paintings. It sounds ridiculous because obviously you can't do that. There's no way to do that. Even if you combined everyone into like Captain Planet, Captain Collector, there's just no way you could feasibly do that. And I think another angle that comes to mind, when we're talking about this higher end category, you're dealing with people that own sports teams or that have businesses that generate this type of money annually. And it's all relative at the end of the day. I know a lot of people hear $1 million and they get intimidated, but it's all relative. If we go back to like when we were all in school, if someone came up to you and said, hey, your most prized card, whatever it is, I'll give you $1,000 for that, and that might be double your money at the time, most people aren't going to take that deal. So if you go up to a guy who spent $1 million on Pick Your Poison collectible and his business or whatever they do to generate income makes that in a year or close to that, they're probably going to be like, no, I can just get more money through my work, my job, whatever it is. I can't just get more Honus Wagners. I can't just get more Charizards. I can't get more, whatever item it is. So that's why people, when you see these big sales of like the historic item go in auction for a new price, it's because you have these buyers that can generate money. They can't generate that piece of history. And whether you value Charizard or Lotus or whatever it is up to you. It's up to the consumer at the end of the day. But ultimately, this is why buyouts don't work with something like a PSA 10 First Edition Charizard. It's too high in the mountain. Again, the auction's too thin up there. It's not flippable. It's something you can't take and make a quick flip on. Now, I know people will say, well, what if you took the two off the market? At the end of the day, you're in this catch-22 again. You're in this paradox of, okay, let's say you successfully bought two Charizards at $100K each. If people get wind of that, then yeah, you're going to have that reaction of people like, oh, is this the new price? Will they come out? And then that's going to be your baseline, so you don't even make money. It's just not a feasible strategy. I think, again, Magic and like these little blips here of the month short-term buyout strategy, maybe it works for some of those people. For me, it just sounds like a headache. I'd rather just go get a part-time job and enjoy my life and enjoy cards. But at the end of the day, it's more of a fiction. I think it stems from that root of like, it's really hot on the internet to complain and be negative and be cynical and, talk about conspiracies for why things are the way they are, then really just analyze that, yeah, it's probably really hard to do this. It's probably really hard, even if experts in the hobby don't do it as a business model. It's probably not feasible. So that's my take on buyouts in Pokemon. I don't really see them as a feasible reality. I think most of the activity, I think a good way to end this is that most of the activity in Pokemon is organic. People really learn to love the cards because of their history. Their appreciation evolves over time. Stuff like this, for example, was new when I started. This was a new card. And this thing is vintage now, or old now. It's old CGI. You got your brand new Charizard GX right there for a contrast. I mean, this was like 2 years old when I started. Or basically, not even that, just a year old. It was right there, when I got back into it. So that's the thing at the end of the day, is you learn to appreciate the stuff. This stuff ages with time, history adds. With Pokemon, I would say it's very organic. It's driven from sentimentality and emotion. Even if you want to have strategy, for people, who go into a purchase, you're allowed to use as much strategy or as lack of strategy as you want. That's your choice at the end of the day. But I think why I don't ever buy the alarmist mentality of buyouts is because these are pieces of cardboard with ink on them that we don't need to survive. It's not water, food, gas, energy, medicine. It's none of that. These are pieces of cardboard that we enjoy. Majority of the hobby is comprised of that, even the high end that people fictionalize and conspiratorialize about. It's just people who are doing the same thing. They might have more strategy in there, but they genuinely like this stuff. So there you go. That's my take on Charizards and buyouts. It's not a thing. I don't know how it could be a thing. The availability is gone. I think another thing, just to reiterate, is that you can't do, like, when you see even 10 Charizards, like with Gary or whatever, you can't do that anymore. It's not a thing. Even when he was doing that, people were telling him not to do it. It's dumb. You're foolish for buying this. Same with me. Every step of the way, it's all exceptions. So there you go, guys. Let me know what you think. And that is pretty much it. You know the deal. Till next time.